Welcome to DataViz Daily. I'm Kevin McGinley, and today I want to talk about something I introduced a couple episodes ago, where I created a new data set using a tool called Exploratory out of my 2016 election debate data set. And you can see it over here on the left-hand side. The original data set only came with line, speaker, text, and date, and I, using Exploratory, manufactured these additional columns here. And I want to talk about why I created the sequence field, the prior sequence field, and the next sequence field. The reason from a business perspective, or from a sort of answering a question perspective, is because I've got here the audience as a speaker, and the way this file or this data set works is we basically have a new line every time a particular speaker speaks, whether that's someone who is one of the candidates who's part of the debate, whether that's a moderator, whether it's when they had the panel debate, whether it's one of the panelists asking the candidates a question, or in this case we see the audience here. And what I want to find out is, when they recorded the audience reacting either with applause or laughter, what was said right before that. And that would be hard with sort of standard filtering to accomplish. And so what I ended up doing was creating this sort of sequence column and then manufacturing what was the sequence number right before that, as well as what was the sequence number right after that, so that I could do a little bit of this sort of what happened right before, what happened right after type analysis. So if I do that to kind of see, what happened that generated applause or laughter, I need a field that helps me do that. And ultimately, it's going to be easiest if I can kind of pre-join all of this data together to kind of line all that up for me nicely. And so that's one reason that we sort of introduced this sequence field, because if I just kind of start over here, I'm going to delete this visualization, delete this filter. If we look at, sort of line and date, just sort of add that to a table view, we get, hey, every line was spoken on every date. Now, as you get higher in the line numbers, not every debate or every date had the same number of lines. So eventually you're going to run out of, it's not going to be 4 for each line number. Conversely, if I sort of swap these two columns around, you would see it would run up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., all the way to the last line of the debate for a given date. So it's really the combination of line and date that is my unique key within this data set. My unique identifier for any given row is the combination of the date of the debate as well as the line number that was spoken on that date. So that's what sequence ultimately became. So if I drag sequence over here, replace it with line number, you can see what I did, and the commas and the decimal points sort of screw this up, but you can see 2016, 926, line number 1. Now, I used Exploratory to sort of zero pad my line numbers so that I could get this to line up nicely. But ultimately, I generated my sort of own sequence number. If we look at the prior sequence number then, what that ultimately ends up being is, well, what was the one right before that? In the case of this very first one, this prior sequence number right here is actually not going to exist. But as you look at 02, 01 is the one right before it, which you can see here. And this is a strategy that we use sometimes within data warehousing to allow us to join data sets together effectively with itself to see what was the thing that either happened right after, or right before, or if I were to add next sequence here, I can also do the same thing to show what happened right after. So you can see here that sequence 1, sequence 2 is the thing that happens next, etc. So what's going to be the easiest way to join these together? Now, I could come in here and add a data set, but I'm actually going to do this with data flows to kind of show you this use case where I can kind of create a new data set by combining these together. So I'm just going to go back to my home screen here, and I'm going to go to data sources. and I'm going to create a new data flow. And I'm going to go ahead and add in my data source. And as it turns out, I've actually created already a second copy of this data source. So if I go here, right-click, Add Step, I can do this Add Data. And you can see here I've created this same version, 2016 debates with sentiment prior. Exactly the same file that you can see there uploaded from that CSV file. This is uploaded from the same CSV file. So it's really just the same data set copied, and I'm just going to go ahead and add it in. Oops. And so now I've got these two here. And if I control click on them and right click, I can do a join, which now basically says, hey, I'm going to join the top with the bottom. I want to make sure, because I have that sort of scenario of you know, next and last, I'm just going to make sure I grab all rows from both. And in this case, I'm going to take my sequence column and I'm actually going to join it in the second one to the prior sequence column. And what that's going to do, if we look at our preview here, is it's going to say, okay, here are my sort of normal line numbers, but if I scroll over to the right, I get, well, here is the you know, sort of line number that comes after. So in this case, if we kind of scroll over, we see that we've got, here is line number 1, and if we scroll to the right, a little hard to judge, here we get line number 2. Now we're getting line number 1 here because I selected all rows. Maybe I don't want that to happen in this case because I'm not going to do the next sequence. So here I could just choose matching rows, and in my preview that row should go away. So now I've got my join, and what I can do now is, if you notice, you know, we've got line, speaker, text here, but if we keep scrolling over, sorry, I've got to do a lot of scrolling here, we're eventually going to get a lot of columns duplicated with an _1 behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and add a step that allows me to rename some of the columns. So I'm going to keep all those columns the same from the original data set, but some of these from the _1, I want to change those. So let's go ahead and change this to prior speaker, change that to prior text. So this would allow me to see who was the speaker that spoke before, what did they say. Don't really care about the date, don't really care about the debate itself. Sequence numbers I'm going to handle with matching. Maybe I do want the sentiment, so let's, you know, what was the sentiment of the thing that was said prior, so I could see something like that. And I might want the speaker type as well, so what was the speaker type of that prior speaker. So go ahead and change the names of those. Now, I don't really need all of these extra _1 columns, so I'm going to go ahead and add another step here that allows me to select the columns that I want. Now, by default, it selects everything, but if I come down here and choose, okay, well, let's get rid of that one, and if we kind of grab all these extra _1s, we can shift-click to remove selected to get rid of those, and I don't really need line count, so I'm going to remove that as well. So now I've got sort of all my original data fields, but now I've got these prior fields as well that I can see who was the prior speaker, what did they say, what was the sentiment of that, and what was their speaker type. So the last step that I can do now is create a new data source here by doing save data, and I can call this something like 2016 debates prior speaker, something like that. And I could go ahead and save this data flow in case I wanted to run it again, but I can also just go ahead and run it, and it's complete. If I come back out here to the main menu and create a new project, you'll see that that data set has now been created for me. So here is 2016 debates prior speaker. That's the data set I just created. I can go ahead and add that to a project. And now I can start to do things like, okay, well, I want to know, when the speaker is the audience and the text that they say is laughter. Who is the prior speaker? What did they say? Oops, got a control click. And we'll just put this into a simple table. And I could just pop this into presentation mode. And now I can see, here is the person that spoke. Here's what they said. My favorite here in all of this is when Martha Raddatz said, and really the audience needs to calm down here. That generated some laughter for sure. So in this case, basically what we're getting is, here are all the things that generated laughter. We could also switch this and say, okay, well, what are the things that generated applause instead? And here are those as well. So we've got, Lester Holt, Mr. Trump, could we just take 10 seconds and then we ask the final question? That generated some applause that we were near the end of the debate. I think everybody was ready to be done with that. But anyway, bottom line there, what we're doing is we're using the fact that we've got a data set that's got a sense of order to it. Things happen in a sense of order, and we can use the generation of those types of sequence columns to find out, what are the things that happen right before or right after a particular event. And there's no limit to this. You could create, what happened right before, what happened 2 before, 3 before, 5 before, etc. You could even set this up in a sort of calculate on the fly type manner as well, depending on how many, sort of periods you want to go back or how many instances of event you want to go back. But ultimately, this is why you would want to consider joining a data set to itself, but matching on a different key column, and how you would go ahead and do that using data flows. So for DataViz Daily, I'm Kevin McGinley. Thanks for watching.